Okay, so a talking point from white and black Republicans alike is somehow rap music is ruining the black community. This bridge video comes from a channel called Torrin Rain Reloaded. He has a lot of live streams and breakdowns about different socio-political issues and problems facing not just America, but especially black society. If you're pro-black, I recommend you check out Torrin Rain Reloaded. This is a good channel and a good chance for me to talk about some issues I have with people that criticize rap music, even though I don't really listen to that much rap music. So for me, right, I listen to mostly punk rock, hardcore style music, right? Because I'm a skater, yada, yada, yada. Like Minor Threat, TSOL, JFA, and so forth. In 90s stuff like Operation Ivy, No Effects started in the 80s, but it's more associated with the 90s. Barrett Religion. And then when I'm not listening to that, I throw on some old school rap, some Ice-T, some NWA, some Eric B. and Rakim, some little follow leader when I'm skating or something like that. But the point being is that, with me experiencing all these different genres of music, punk, indie, metal, is for some odd reason that the worst and the bad things about rap music get associated with an entire race, when the bad things about other genres of music get associated with that demographic of people, right? So, for instance, right, they will say, like, what's a modern trap like drill rapper? I don't really know any because I'm not really into modern rap music, so I don't know any. So just think of a modern day trap or drill rapper, right? They will say that that person represents the whole black community and what's exactly wrong with black people, but they wouldn't say the same thing about somebody like Gigi Allen, somebody who used to literally get on stage, smear feces on himself, and throw it at the audience. They wouldn't say that about Gigi Allen or any of the other rock bands in general, like Slayer, Megadeth, and Black Sabbath, using satanic imagery, lyrics about worshiping the devil, lyrics about being the devil, and all sorts of things. But for some odd reason, rap music, all rap is tied directly to black people, even though not only is hardcore hip hop and rap not the only genre of music that black people have created, but there's many different kinds of black people that listen to many different kinds of music. And it seems like when racist people are talking about political issues that affect black people, the weaponization of rap music sweeps everybody else under the rug. Because not even just me as somebody who's like a punk or whatever, there's people who listen to gospel. There's people that listen to soul music and dance music. There's people that listen to power pop and EDM. And it's like all these black people deal with the same racism as the people listening to so-called rap. But what's even more sinister about this is that people love controversial music. Listen to the Germs sometime and look at Darby Crash's life. But the point being is that people love disgusting and controversial music. And somebody could be listening to the nastiest drill rap, but the whole time they on their way to work. So I kind of feel like people are stereotyping the fact that young people like spicy content and things that are edgy, and trying to say that that makes them a loser or that makes it so there's something wrong with them. And it's also ignoring the fact there's tons of white people and whoever else that also listen to rap music. But hey, I'm just here to watch this video and commentate over it for now, and I'm going to get right into it.
A narrative repeated by certain conservatives and media personalities, pundits, and even some black commentators desperate for approval from power structures that never respected them to begin with. That narrative goes something like this. Rap music destroyed the black community. Not redlining, not discriminatory housing, not mass incarceration, not the crack epidemic, not the CIA controversy surrounding drug trafficking, not the prison industrial complex, not predatory lending, not economic sabotage, educational neglect, police brutality, or even white supremacy. None of those. Apparently, a teenager with a microphone somehow did more damage than every institution armed with billions of dollars, legislation, surveillance systems, and police departments, prisons, media conglomerates, and political power. That is what they want people to believe. And the reason this narrative exists is because it's
And it's an odd narrative, right? And I speak for myself as somebody who doesn't even listen to rap music. And, you know, I grew up in the same red line neighborhoods, going to the same underfunded schools, with the same underfunded infrastructures, with the same over policed neighborhoods as the kids so called listening to rap music. So it always bugs me, again, when they say this, because it sweeps all black people into one box and pretend like we're all out here trying to gangbang and thug out. Then it misses the fact that this is just music, and the music somebody listens to does not necessarily represent their lifestyle, right? Because the most I have in common with punk is I drink a little bit sometimes and I skate. But and in my political viewpoints, but I'm not getting loaded. I'm not getting sloppy drunk. I'm employed. I take care of myself. You know, I wear a uniform every day I go to work and everything. Lunchbox, all that. And I drive to work, do my thing for 8 hours, come home. If I'm not doing this, I'm watching something or I'm skating. And they pretend like the music, again, the music you listen to does not always represent who you are just because it has some offensive lyrics. And I think that's a very reductive and ignorant way looking at music. But then again, conservatives weren't exactly the best people to analyze art. You see my Michael Knowles video from a couple of days ago.
convenient. If rap music becomes the villain, then the system gets to walk away clean. If rap music becomes the primary culprit, then politicians never have to answer for economic destruction. If rap music becomes the disease, then nobody has to discuss why black communities were flooded with drugs, over-policed, underfunded, segregated, and economically trapped in the first place. The rap music narrative is one of the greatest acts of political sleight of hand ever performed. And the saddest part about this is that some black voices repeat it louder than everybody else or anybody else. So this deep,
Which again is weird to me, as again somebody that's kind of on the outside of this culture. That's very weird to me when these so-called black rock music lovers or black country lovers or gospel listener tours or whoever else, because it's not all of us, right? Obviously, I'm here, but it's kind of weird. It's very weird to when you hear them say that, because again, it sweeps all black people into one category, and I think that's wrong and disingenuous.
job is not pretending rap music is perfect. Rap has
Because
its
no
flaws, just
genre
like
of
other
music
genres of
is.
music. Some lyrics are destructive, some artists push ignorance, and some executives profit from dysfunction. I would even argue a lot of them profit from dysfunction. But the argument that rap music caused more damage than systemic oppression itself is historically unserious. It collapses under scrutiny because music does not create political systems. Music does not write legislation. Music does not create economic collapse. Music does not engineer segregation. Music does not invent discriminatory banking practices. Music does not militarize policing, and music does not hold up or build up prisons. Governments do, corporations do, institutions do, and power structures do. And for decades, people with power have been searching for ways to avoid accountability. So blaming rap music became one of the easiest ways to do it. One of the biggest flaws in the whole rap destroy black America argument is chronologically reality. Black America was facing systemic oppression long before rap music even existed. Hip hop emerged in the late 1970s, like I would say like the mid to late 1970s. But by then, black neighborhoods had already been redlined, schools had already been segregated and underfunded, black wealth had already been sabotaged repeatedly, the FBI had already started targeting black activists, black veterans had already been denied equal treatment, black Wall Street had already been destroyed, and black families had already faced generations of discrimination. So let's
Because that's funny, because it kind of reminds me of when I was a kid, and I would be walking from school sometimes, and no, or to school, because I go into elementary school, and even middle school, right? And I used to walk up the street, literally vagrants, addicts. You are walking past all that on your way to school. That's your neighborhood. Then you winded up seeing schools across the neighborhoods close. So all the kids from one school go to another. You have 30 kids in the class to one teacher. You have schools that are underfunded, not cleaned properly with no sort of extracurricular activities to give people something to do after school, and they wonder why certain people still talk about racism. And again, even when I was growing up, I was listening to rap as a person that was adjacent to it. Not that it became my favorite genre, but I was still affected by these racist systems and these social problems. So again, listening to rap music or not, doesn't make you as a black person be affected by racism or not. And again, this is as Turn illustrated there, right? Mr. Rain illustrated there, is that all these problems that happened to the black community that were legislated to existence existed way before the late 1980s, 1990s, when people like Ice Cube or Eazy-E or Eric B and Rakim, before any of these Ice-T, any of these people would exist. And they will come out with their music, which is somewhat just a critique of what they were going through. All these problems existed.
Ask a very uncomfortable question. If rap music destroyed the black community like many say, then who destroyed it before rap existed? Because the conditions people complain about today did not magically appear when somebody grabbed the microphone in the Bronx. The foundation was already damaged. Black Americans faced centuries of economic extraction. After slavery ended, systems evolved instead of disappearing. Convict leasing, sharecropping, Jim Crow, housing discriminations, employment discrimination, educational discrimination, and banking discrimination. America constantly found new ways to economically and politically restrain black advancement. And yet somehow some people want to skip all of that history and act like NWA was more dangerous than institutional racism. Think about how absurd that actually sounds. Entire government structures spent decades limiting black mobility. But
shit, look up the Iran-Contra scandal sometimes. The reason why illegal guns and cocaine got into black communities is because the Contras were allowed to sell their contraband to black and Hispanic communities and even poor white communities to a lesser extent when they were trafficking guns back to Nicaragua. So this idea that all these problems just evolved out of nowhere. Like black people have a gene where, some black people just want to start smoking crack. It's ridiculous. Or killing one another for no reason. Because if you live in a neighborhood where there is not a lot of social opportunity, also engineered by the government, where your neighborhood looks like shit, it smells like shit, you go to a school that's underfunded, with an old decaying ass basketball court with rat poop all over the motherfucking the cooking class area. When you go sit in there for a couple of hours, you wind up with kids that turn to violence and gang membership in order to make it. Now these gangs are existing to a very lesser extent today, but the foundation for them to exist had to be propped up on something.
Apparently Ice Cube lyrics were the real apocalypse. The math, as they say, ain't mathing. The timeline is not timelining. The argument only works if people intentionally ignore history, and many do.
Yeah, because it's anti-intellectualism, so these problems never get real airtime or addressed. In fact, if you do bring up these problems to these black conservatives or whoever else you're talking to, they will say that it's quote-unquote victim mentality. They treat real legislation and real policy that hurt the black community as victim mentality, while anti-intellectual arguments such as rap music hurts black people is given full airtime.
Because acknowledging history requires accountability. Blaming rap requires nothing. One of the most intellectually dishonest claims people make is suggesting rap music caused the destruction associated with the crack era. That is historical revisionism. The crack epidemic was already devastating black communities before gangster rap even became mainstream. Entire neighborhoods were collapsing, violence increased, addiction skyrocketed, families fractured, communities became militarized zones. And this happened during a period where political leadership escalated punitive policies instead of addressing root causes.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that all the socio-political leadership in the black community that was leading us towards togetherness and positivity, all these people were literally killed. And think of all the nameless people that were killed, jailed, or we don't know about. We don't read in history books. We don't even read in dissertations about black leadership that were too scared to continue after they saw what happened to Dr. King, after what happened to Malcolm X, and after what happened to Fred Hampton. Millions of black people across America during the 60s, 70s, and I'm sure to an extent before 1985, probably tried to unite the black community, but were completely targeted and systemically disempowered. And who was left? If not grifters like like the black nationalist groups, which I'm not going to name here right now, but because they are deserving of their own video, the gang members were left. The gang members took advantage of the power vacuum left by the fact that the poor the poorest black people, the most desperate black people, didn't have social or political leadership, right? Because everybody doesn't want to turn towards the church, right? Everybody doesn't want to turn towards education, enforced education, because that's unfair that to educate themselves about their problems or to progress in life, they have to try 2 to 3 times as harder to learn how to do any fucking thing or to progress through school. So a lot of black people did the natural human thing and gave up. And this happened across communities that were poor and working class, but it specifically was targeted at black people. It was targeted at a certain income level that the Contras were allowed to traffic and sell the drugs in their community, while the Reagan administration did nothing about it.
The so-called war on drugs became an actual war on black communities.
Yep.
Mandatory minimums exploded, prison population surged, police presence intensified, and communities were destabilized. Rap music did not create crack. Crack was not invented by rappers. Rappers were documenting the environment they grew up in. That is the part.
And what's funny about what Mr. Rain just said there is that if you listen to other genres of music by other artists that came out about the time, and then this is even like pop artists, like Michael Jackson was acknowledging gang violence and crime, and even the artists that I listen to, like I don't know if I can say their name on YouTube without getting some sort of flag, but Suicidal Tendencies acknowledged the war on drugs. MDC acknowledged the war on drugs. So many punk bands, the Dicks, that's the punk band name, recognized the war on drugs and recognized the war on working class people and recognized the war on the black community. They saw what was going on and they made music speaking out about who was being targeted and why. So this idea that only rap music talked about things that were going on in poor communities or even in the suburbs, right? Prostitution, neglectful family, drug abuse, right? Drug abuse was a thing in many communities throughout the 1980s, 1990s, and even up till today. So this idea that it was exclusively a black problem that only black rappers talked about is completely disingenuous.
Critics intentionally ignored. Much of early gangster rap functioned as reportage. It was ugly because the created the conditions. That logic is absolutely ridiculous and absurd. The crack epidemic was tied to deeper systemic issues: economic abandonment, unemployment, urban decay, political neglect.
Because some examples, right, for here in Detroit about systemic neglect and urban decay, right? Two of my favorite examples that I want to bring up. So a lot of the plants that were serving black neighborhoods as sources of employment were allowed to close and go overseas without punishment. The Reagan administration, all that outsourcing and our jobs going across the seas was done by two-term Republican Ronald Reagan. Allowed Chrysler, Ford, General Motors, and whoever else to ship these jobs overseas and allowed them to do it without punishing them because it was taking jobs away from the poorest people in this country, right? So that meant that neighborhood had less opportunities. Even if it was laboring, this community had less opportunities. They had less upward mobility, and they're subject to more crime, violence, and other social problems going on at the time. I know I'm sweating, but I don't want to turn on my air conditioner and have that blowing into this microphone because I don't know how strong this microphone is, and I don't know if it's going to resist the wind sound. Even though there's a dead cat on it, sort of, I don't know if it's going to be strong enough to resist the wind that's blowing out of the air conditioner, so I'm just going to deal with it. But the point being is that these things were allowed to happen, right, without Ronald Reagan doing anything about it. And I feel like a lot of the context of what happened back then, even though we talk about it out loud, the blame for it was not assigned properly, right? The whole escalation of the war on drugs was started by Richard Nixon, right? And by the time any Democrat came into office, it was already normal public policy. So they had no choice but to continue it. Because so many billions of dollars have been invested into this so-called war on drugs, they had to continue.
drug trafficking networks, and harsh criminalization policies.
Not to say that in their own ways they didn't exacerbate the shit, like with Hillary Clinton talking about super predators.
But blaming those factors would force difficult conversations. Blaming rap music is easier because it creates a cartoon-style villain. And America loves cartoon villains because they allow institutions to avoid self-examination. The claim that rap music damaged Black America more than white supremacy is not just wrong, but it is historically insulting. White supremacy shaped housing policy, education access, wealth distribution, criminal justice systems, healthcare access, employment opportunities, political representation, and media portrayals. These systems affected entire generations. Generationally, that matters. A rap song cannot prevent somebody from getting a mortgage. A rap album cannot redline neighborhoods. A rap concert cannot create sentencing disparities. A rap lyric cannot deny school funding. Institutions did those things.
And this is facts, right? And also this is corroborating with my point from earlier, is that Black people who express themselves differently and listen to alternative forms of music still deal with the same racist problems with racism as the Black people listening to the so-called rap music. Not to mention the fact that rap is a very multifaceted genre with many subgenres that talk about a myriad of given subjects. I think that it's disingenuous for anybody to say that every single Black person talking about racism or the problems that we deal with can be tracked back to racism, because you can be listening to anything, right? Not even the stuff I listen to. Like, your favorite bands can be Avenged Sevenfold, Tool, and Nirvana, but you're still growing up in a redline neighborhood. You're still growing up with underfunded school. You're still growing up with underfunded infrastructure in a dirty neighborhood where it lacks upward mobility for the most part, unless you work probably 3 times as hard as somebody would have to out of the suburbs. So this idea that racism or the problems with it will just disappear because you stop listening to rap music is just, again, very disingenuous.
Power structures did those things, and yet there are people who genuinely try to argue that rap music was somehow more destructive
Anti-intellectualism,
than organized racial oppression. That is not analysis, that is propaganda. And propaganda often works by shifting blame away from power. Notice how often the rap narrative focuses exclusively on individual behavior while ignoring structural barriers. That's intentional, because if the discussion stays centered on music and culture alone, then society never has to confront the machinery behind inequality. Everything then becomes Black people are doing this to themselves. That narrative comforts people who do not want to discuss institutional responsibility. It transforms systemic injustice into cultural pathology. And once you convince people that culture alone caused the problem, then that system never has to change. That is why this narrative remains politically useful. America has a long history of blaming entertainment for social problems, such as comic books, rock music, video games, heavy metal, movies, and television.
But again, those other things are ignored and kept to the subgroup of a certain types of person instead of being discussed wholly like rap music is for Black people. I want you to always take note of that and notice. So I'm going to watch a few more minutes of this, probably up to the 10-minute marker, because I don't want to steal the video, because you should go watch this. But I just want to get my 2 cents in there because, this is something that needs to be put out there.
Generation has its moral panic, but for some reason rap became a uniquely convenient scapegoat because it was tied to Black youth. That's when everything changed. Critics often treated rap not merely as entertainment, but as evidence of supposed racial pathology. Suddenly lyrics became courtroom exhibits. Politicians held hearings, news channels ran non-stop outrage segments. Commentators acted like every rapper was personally responsible for societal collapse. Meanwhile, factories were disappearing, jobs were vanishing, schools were deteriorating, housing inequality persisted, healthcare gaps widened, and prisons expanded. But somehow rap music dominated the conversation. Why, you may ask? Because culture wars are easier than economic reform. Politicians would rather blame artists than explain why entire cities lost economic opportunity. It is easier to point at a music video than explain systemic neglect. And many conservative figures realized something very important. Attacking rap music generated political capital. It energized audiences. It created easy talking points. It avoided nuanced discussion. Most importantly, it shifted focus away from institutions. Because once people start investigating institutions, uncomfortable truths begin to emerge. And powerful systems do not like uncomfortable truths. Now, let's have a real honest conversation, especially on this part right here. Because this deep dive is not about pretending every criticism of rap music is fake. There
And I'll let you continue that part. I just mostly wanted to talk about again two things in this is that rap music did not lead to the systemic neglect and social problems that came from things like the war on drugs, redlining, or the ending events of slavery, the closing events, and the failure of Reconstruction. And I also just wanted to come to this video and say that every black person that likes alternative form of music is not some buck dancing Uncle Tom sitting up here trying to say that their community is made worse by a subgenre of music. And in fact, I'm here to expose the complete hypocrisy of any of those black politicians or pundits that would dare weaponize this genre of music and pretend like all other genres of music are so-called innocent and on the up and up, and use these lyrics to impugn black people. And again, you can go watch this video on your own time. I'm not going to content steal, because that's not what this channel is about. It's about commentary. So you have a good rest of your day. I'm gonna go turn on my air conditioner.